Richard Halloran, just called in onto the Teagasc stand this morning. I'm with Michael Hennessy, Head of Crops Knowledge Transfer with Teagasc. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me. I'm hearing from grain growers at the ploughing match this week that they've had a pretty good year. I mean, would you concur with that?
Oh, yeah.
As a general perspective.
Generally speaking, it's been a fantastic year. Most crops yielded extremely well. Look, the conditions were fantastic from the very start of the year, all the way from this time last year, the whole way through. Crops were going really well in terms of there were full crops all the way through, therefore there was good average yield all the way through. So yeah, it's been a great year. Still waiting for the price, I suppose, from the merchants, which kind of really determine kind of how good it is going to be.
Okay. So what are the key messages that you'll be communicating, your team will be communicating to cereal growers and other tillage farmers coming onto the stand over the next couple of days?
Yeah, there's a number of them, I suppose. Look, the first big one is really risk. I mean, the risk going forward is fairly enormous. Very high fertiliser costs, and pretty much everything else is after increasing as well. Obviously, the price of contracting, the price of diesel, but the price of ag chems, the price of everything is after going up. So therefore, the overall price of production per tonne is now in around 200 to 210 euros a tonne. So that's substantially more than it was in the past. So look, growers need to get, I suppose next year, they need to get maybe 250 euros a tonne to make any sort of a profitability at all. So look, from our point of view, we can't do anything about the price, but from our point of view, it's about helping farmers trying to mitigate that risk, trying to plan out crops properly. Can they reduce the amount of crops that have a very high demand on nitrogen? You know, get in some of the peas and beans, and some of those are looking extremely well in terms of the profitability of those beans, especially. So there's plenty of opportunities really within that.
Okay. 2023. You mentioned risk. How trained, to use that term, are Irish tillage farmers to look at risk seriously and manage it? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I suppose they're generally speaking, they're optimistic people. That's the first thing, first and foremost. And they generally speaking will go from one year to the next, and have a small budget. I suppose really if we were to say ask them to improve a little bit, it would be around kind of the budgeting area just a little bit more in terms of knowing how much they made, knowing exactly all the various different costs, and also kind of pushing that out then to next year, doing a budget for next year. And it so happens this year we're teaming up with a different company, or with a company called Farm Plan, for an electronic crop recording program to help tillage farmers do that. So tillage farmers can get that from Teagasc, and that'll really help them in terms of helping to do out those costs and mitigate the risk going forward.
Okay. Do you think we're looking at a sustained increase in the tillage area in Ireland?
It's a very hard one to know. We've had a really good year this year. Last year was actually a pretty good year as well. Look, in overall terms, it's a relatively low income crop per hectare in comparison to dairy. But in terms of overall income, two things would absolutely strike me. One is that yes, we're lower income in comparison to dairy, but if you're to look at it on a labour unit basis, we're actually pretty close. So obviously the whole thing about tillage farms, if you want to do it, it's increasing the area and getting access to land. And it's probably going to be more the specialist tillage farmers that are going to increase that area for the most part. So that's where it's going to come from.
Oilseed rape. The talk is the acreage is up this year. Is that fact or fiction?
No, very much fact. We reckon it's probably up anywhere between, and it's kind of hard to gauge just a little bit. It's anywhere from maybe 20 to 40%. So we might be touching maybe 20,000 hectares, which is phenomenal. We're coming off a base of maybe 14 last year, but it's fantastic. Look, last year was a brilliant year on oilseed rape. So for the most part, crops look like they've established reasonably well. It's all in the ground now at this stage.
Yeah.
So hopefully it'll turn out to be a really good year again with oilseed rape next year.
So in terms of just priorities now for tillage farmers looking to get crop into the ground over the next week or two, I mean, the rape, I take it, would be we're there now, aren't we, in terms of the rape that's in the ground. That's it.
It's probably too late to put in rape now at this stage. Really, any rape really probably cut off date about the 10th of September, give or take. So it really should be in probably through the ground now at this stage.
Yes.
So now people are going to be turning hopefully to cereals.
Yeah.
So really first wheats are probably going to be the first thing they're going to go in. But look, there's kind of time to get those in. Wouldn't panic with them. Some people are probably trying to go at them this week, but obviously people have an eye to the weather, especially if you have bigger acreage. People will be tempted. If you have smaller acreage, try and push it out towards maybe early October, which will help mitigate two things that kind of hurt farmers last year. One was BYDV, which is aphids, and the other one was take-all. Going a little bit later, sowing a little bit later, reduces the risk of both of those to keep up your average yield.
One last question. You mentioned BYDV. Is it controllable without an insecticide?
No, it's not. It is and it's not. It depends on where you are in the country. Last year we had BYDV in various different crops around the country. Where you have it, where it's warmer for a longer period of time, such as down in Cork, for instance, you tend to have aphids flying that little bit later into the season. So you could have got infection all the way into maybe November and December. The best strategy we can do is two things. One is that we can plant varieties of winter barley that are like Jiao, that are tolerant to BYDV. And the second one is later sowing. If you sow later, you reduce your risk. But obviously there's a balance there between sowing later and lowering your yield. So ideally, winter barley really should have it in by about the second week or so in October, probably the ideal date.
Great stuff. Michael, I know you're under pressure, you're very busy. Thanks for taking the time out to speak to me. Okay. Cheers, good luck to you.
Thanks.
Cheers, thank you.